Yo, what's up guys, it's your boy Sami here. Today we are gonna see, what if female Itachi is possessive of Naruto, part 4. Hope you'll enjoy this video. So before we start, please subscribe to our channel, and like this video. So let's get into the video. The Sharingan, the eyes that reflected the heart, that's what Naruto always called them. Looking at her newly acquired ocular in the mirror, Izumi couldn't help but think that hers reflected sorrow. Red eyes which now reflected the blood of her fallen comrade, that was all she saw. Is this the weight of the agony that you endure, Naruto? She thought to herself, before shaking her head. No, it was disrespectful of her to compare her pain to that of someone who has lost so much. Nevertheless, sharing a bit in Naruto's pain made her feel as though she understood him a bit better. She had seen many people die throughout her life, mostly due to her father bringing her to look at the horrors of the Third Shinobi World War firsthand. However, now was the first time she had been forced to watch the life drain from the eyes of someone she knew personally. Tenma, her teammate, had died. To be more specific, his life had been stolen, taken by a monster who hid behind a mask. Izumi vividly remembered the helplessness she felt when facing the masked man, with all of her attacks going through him, as if he were a mere phantom. She would have surely perished that day if not for Tenma intervening at the cost of his own life. Her thoughts were interrupted, and she was forced to compose herself after she felt a familiar presence approaching her from behind. Looking over her shoulder, she saw the little bundle of energy that was her sister, Mito. The girl's presence had been incredibly helpful over the past few days, but she'd be lying if she said the first time she saw her she didn't flinch. The redness of her hair initially caused Izumi's mind to be assaulted with images of blood. "Big sis, mama says that big bro will be coming home soon," the little girl remarked with a smile. She said that he promised before he left that he'd be back by today no matter what. Izumi nodded, quite skillfully hiding her inner turmoil. "Yes, I heard," she confirmed. "And Naruto always keeps his word, so expect him to return any minute now." Mito squirmed with delight. "Gah, I'm so excited." She beamed. "I can't wait to show him the new drawings that I made for him." The remark made Izumi raise her brow in mock surprise. "Drawings?" she asked, knowing that her sister came in with the sole purpose of showing off her artwork. The inquiry produced an expected result, with Mito bobbing her head up and down with enough force and energy to snap an ordinary person's neck. She then ran out of the room, and presumably to her own, before returning with several pieces of paper. Sheer glee was evident on her face when she extended the papers toward his big sister, likely with the intention of having them critiqued. Pretending to look upon the works of art with a critical gaze, Izumi found herself incredibly amused as she flipped through each one. As expected, they were all pretty similar in style, with bright colors and crudely drawn figures and objects. Most involved a spiky-haired blonde boy, who was very obviously Naruto, doing all sorts of activities with a much shorter red-headed girl. "Very nice. I particularly like the detail in the drawings. They're so lifelike." Mito grinned before cockily crossing her arms. "Right. They're pretty awesome," she responded casually, as if she was already aware of how amazing her drawings were. "But I couldn't help but notice that Sasuke isn't in any of these," Izumi commented, playfully. "Where was he when you and Naruto were having all of this fun?" As expected, Mito scoffed haughtily. "He's too much of a baby to play with us," she explained. "He'd probably just pee his pants or something if he came along, and we'd have to take him all the way back home to change his diaper." The door to Izumi's room suddenly burst open, with an enraged-looking Sasuke stomping in. It was clear that he had been eavesdropping on their entire conversation, which was the reason Izumi had brought his name up in the first place. His presence was quite easy to detect, even when he was trying to be stealthy. "What was it you just said, crybaby?" he growled, getting into Mito's face. Aghast at being branded with arguably the most heinous of childish insults, Mito snapped back at Sasuke, sparking an argument that Izumi couldn't bring herself to listen to. While their innocence was without a doubt refreshing, their spats were about as irritating as screeching metal. Even someone with her patience needed a break every once in a while. All it took was a bit of stealth, and she was out of the house without them even knowing that she had left. Minutes later, sitting atop the Hokage's stone faces was about as far away from prying eyes that one could get without actually leaving the village. When choosing which Hokage head she wished to sit on, she chose the fourth, which was a natural choice due to her relationship with Naruto. Gazing out upon the village, she thought about everything that she had come to believe over the course of her admittedly brief life. Her goal had always been to play at least some role in maintaining the peace that so many of her fellow shinobi had died creating, but now she was beginning to wonder if she was even capable of affecting anything at all. That masked man was so powerful. If he desired to kill Sasuke or Mito or harm the village, she'd be unable to stop him. It would be foolish to assume that there weren't others out there like him, perhaps even those that could boast a superior level of strength. The wreckage immediately came to mind. That man had been beating the drums of war for quite some time now, and after audacious move after audacious move, it was becoming progressively more apparent that the conflict he desired was inevitable. People like him, and the masked man, they were among the few types of individuals that she held disdain for. In her eyes, those who had strength were not meant to create violence and conflict, but rather, they were gifted with the talent to use their gifts to fight for the greater good. If she was honest, she felt that their power was being wasted on them. Sitting on the first Hokage's stone head would be much more comfortable. My father had very spiky hair, so the top of his stone head was quite jagged. A familiar voice suddenly said from behind her. Izumi couldn't help but smile upon hearing the voice. Even without seeing Naruto's face, just listening to him speak, feeling his chakra, and knowing that he was there was enough to create a soothing sensation that enveloped her entire being. She turned to face him. "I'm glad that you returned safely, Naruto," she greeted, before shifting over a bit so he could sit next to her. He accepted the unspoken invitation, and slowly lowered himself down next to her. As he did, she subconsciously activated her new Sharingan when she noticed something off about him. He was favoring his side a bit, as if he had been injured in some way or another. His face showed little in the form of pain, but this was Naruto that she was thinking about. He could handle anything in stride. "You're injured," she remarked, as casually as she could. Naruto didn't even so much as look in her direction, as he spoke, "And you have a set of new eyes." Leave it to Naruto to be the first to notice the change in her eyes. To be fair, she had been careful to hide it from anyone that she knew up to this point. It was just another sign that Naruto truly was the person that she was most comfortable around. With him, she didn't feel the need to hide anything that she hid in front of others. How did it happen? Upon hearing the question, her eyes reverted to their normal onyx color, and she appeared to have a faraway gaze, as if recalling a memory that was buried within the confines of her mind. "Tenma was killed on my last mission." There was no immediate response from Naruto, which was unsurprising since he was always the type to think over his words carefully before speaking. Or maybe he just did it for dramatic effect. The ludicrousness of the thought nearly made her chuckle. After all, Naruto was anything but theatrical. Then, he finally spoke. "What do you want to do?" he asked. It didn't take more than a second for her to respond. "I want to become stronger, so that my dreams will cease to be mere dreams." She turned to face him, only to discover that he was already staring at her, intently. His Sharingan was activated, each with 3 Tomo. He had achieved it, the full evolution of the. He was probably far more powerful than he had been last time they saw each other. He placed his hand on her back in a comforting gesture. "We have plenty of time to make that happen," he responded. "Right now we are comfortably residing within the calm before the storm. I will give it my all," she assured with a smile. "I promise." 3 years later, I won't say anything. "You're wasting your time, so just please let me go." Naruto, now taller and more mature, was leaning casually against a tree as he watched the interrogation taking place before him. The victim, the Kumagakure shinobi, whose headband was currently being used as a blindfold to inhibit his sight, was bound tightly to a tree with ninja wire. His shirt had been removed, and there were several cuts littering his arms and upper body. Kneeled before him was Toneri, who was wielding a bloodied kunai. "Come now, you understand your predicament," Toneri said matter-of-factly. "We already know where your people are camped out. We just need some more details, so please relinquish the intel willingly. I grow weary of cutting you." Seated not too far behind Toneri was another Konoha shinobi with unruly black hair and equally black eyes, who was looking as if he was on the precipice of falling asleep out of sheer boredom. He was sitting criss-crossed on the grass, with his chin resting in his palm, his expression deadpan, as he watched Toneri's continuous failed attempts at interrogation. "Come on, man," he complained. "It's clearly not working. How about you just let me use my to loosen his tongue?" Toneri stood up and turned to face his complaining teammate. "Very well," he relented, while cleaning the blood from his kunai with a cloth. "However, Shisui, make sure to incapacitate him after you've finished." Shisui scoffed. "My original plan was to let him run off to warn his people after I finished, but now that you mention it, knocking him out seems like a pretty good idea," he remarked sarcastically before approaching the captured shinobi, his Sharingan active and ready for use. Naruto sighed and pushed himself off the tree. "Wrap this up and use the already, or I will," he requested, with his own Sharingan gleaming in the dark. With a roll of the eyes, Shisui kneeled down before the prisoner and removed the headband that was covering the man's eyes. The man blinked, his vision without a doubt acclimating to having just reclaimed sight. Upon looking at his captors, his eyes widened in fear as he looked at Shisui. "You Shisui Chiha," he muttered to himself, clearly fearful of Shisui's reputation. Being a bit older than Naruto, by a handful of years, Shisui was an amazing prodigy in his own right, with him being hailed as one of the most talented fighters in the history of the Uchiha clan. His use was unmatched, as was his prowess with the Shunshin, granting him various nicknames such as Shisui the Teleporter and Shisui of the Mirage. "Yeah, I am now held still," Shisui responded before finally making eye contact. Immediately, the prisoner's eyes glazed over, and his body seized. He then proceeded to spill his guts against his will, his voice monotone due to the. He muttered about one camp, with 60 men, who had covertly passed over the border not even 24 hours ago. "Well, that confirms the intel that Izumi so graciously provided," Shisui mumbled before knocking the prisoner out and binding his hands and feet. "But at least now we know how many there are. Roughly 60 enemy shinobi, and the wreckage would have likely only sent his most skilled men on such an important mission." They were hidden well, and had managed to pass over the border of the land of hot water without being detected. It was only due to Danzo's paranoia that they were discovered, as he had his own Anbu constantly monitoring the land of fire, and all the minor nations surrounding it. Our original plan will still work just fine, Naruto said. Toneri will advance, and rendezvous with Izumi to eliminate the target while Shisui and I occupy the enemy's attention. Toneri nodded, before forming a single hand seal, chameleon jutsu. Immediately after, his body appeared to turn invisible. A versatile technique indeed, the chameleon jutsu allowed a person to manipulate the way light was reflected off of their body, using chakra inflection. Perceiving the user's position was possible only for ninja who were astute enough to observe minute variations within their surrounding environment, such as distortions of air currents in the immediate vicinity or distinguishing sounds. Of course, however, it was also useless against perceptive abilities, such as the Sharingan and Byakugan. Able to see him clearly, as they due to their Sharingan eyes allowing them to see his chakra, Naruto and Shisui watched Toneri leap into the direction of the camps without a word. He was by far the most adept at stealth and infiltration between the three of them, due to his various, and the X-ray 360-degree vision provided by his Byakugan, as well as his sublime chakra control, allowing him to only be sensed by the most elite sensory shinobi. The two waited for a few minutes before advancing, as well. They'd attack the camp directly, distracting the occupants so that Izumi and Toneri could actually complete the real mission, which was to eliminate a defector that had fled the village with critical intel, hoping to sell it to the Reikage for a profit. How long has it been since we last saw Izumi? A month. Shisui asked while scratching his cheek. Naruto kept his vision ahead, as he and his comrade weaved through the trees. A month and 7 days, actually, he corrected. She's been tracking the defector for quite some time. Shisui grinned and made kissing noises in an attempt to get under Naruto's skin, while counting the days since your little girlfriend left on her mission. Izumi and I are merely friends, Naruto retorted calmly. All he earned in response was a scoff. Yeah, sure. Keep telling yourself that. Naruto could only sigh. It was pointless to argue with Shisui, so he just kept quiet as they continued on. Izumi quietly chewed on a food pill as she observed the enemy camp from a safe distance, perched in a tree. Based on the most recent message she had received from Naruto, Toneri would meet her at her current position to assist with the elimination of the defector. If things went smoothly, this mission wouldn't be all that difficult. Hello, Toneri, she suddenly said out of the blue, able to see the stealthy Byakugan user with the assistance of her Sharingan. When she had discovered that Toneri and Naruto had actually become friends after the latter's trip to Uzashigakure, she was admittedly surprised. They two boys had most definitely started off on the wrong foot when they first met, but apparently, if not for Toneri, Naruto would have died in the ruins of his ancestral home. It made sense that they would form a bond after something like that. Izumi Uchiha, it has been a while, Toneri responded on the branch next to her, though he refrained from deactivating his, leaving him to still be invisible to the naked eye. Are you ready to advance? She nodded in response before bursting into a flock of crows. The crows then flew toward the camp, making sure to stay quiet and fly in the shadows of the night. Toneri's approach was much more straightforward, with him merely running toward the camp with no fear of being spotted. Once the crows reached the perimeter, they formed together, and Izumi appeared once more. She waited until she felt Toneri at her side before she led the way into the camp. Most of the Kumo shinobi were already sleeping in their tents. However, the target was currently being held within the main tent at the center of the camp, and it was surrounded by alert enemies. Getting to the target under their current circumstances would be impossible. Izumi made a set of hand signals to Toneri, which roughly translated to, "We wait for comrades." He seemed to understand what she meant because he stopped moving, and waited at her side until Naruto and Shisui appeared to create the diversion. The signal that the proverbial cavalry had arrived was when a massive fireball roared through the camp, carrying away and incinerating many tents in its wake. The display achieved the desired result, with the Kumagakure shinobi shifting all of their attention to whoever was responsible, even at the cost of neglecting their duty to guard the valued defector. After waiting another moment, Izumi raised her hand in a signal to continue, and the two slowly made it to the camp, keeping low and staying in the shadows as much as possible. In the distance, they heard enemy shinobi shouting in panic, as well as sounds of combat and death. At one point, the Kumagakure shinobi nearly spotted them, but was instantly killed by Shisui, who appeared and disappeared just as quickly with the Shunshin. His mastery of the was truly astounding, and even during such a critical mission, Izumi could not help but find herself in a bit of awe, but only for a brief moment. Naruto and Shisui made things incredibly easy. Due to the clear danger that they both presented, even the guards who had been surrounding the tent left their posts to try and help fend them off. Just like that, they were crouched in front of the tent, mere feet away from reaching the target that Izumi had been pursuing for weeks. After it had become known that a traitor had stolen secret intel and escaped over the village walls under cover of the night, many had been surprised when the Hokage had chosen Izumi to pursue him. Most were under the assumption that he would have chosen Kakashi Haddock and questioned whether a child could get the mission done. Now was the time to prove them wrong. He is inside, I see him, Toneri whispered. Not even a second after he let the words flow from his mouth, Izumi was in the tent with a blade piercing through the defector's chest. She made sure to get it done quickly and cleanly, and took no pleasure in the act itself. Murder had always been something that she wasn't quite fond of, but she was also mature enough to admit that it was something required of her. It is fitting that you did the deed, Toneri said from behind her, as he entered the tent through the front flaps. You alert the others while I dispose of the body. Not needing to be told twice, Izumi exited the tent before weaving through a familiar string of hand seals, and unleashing a massive ball of flames into the night sky. She waited for Toneri to finish his work before leaping back into the darkness once more in the direction of the rendezvous point. In total, the mission had taken only 5 minutes. I'm 99% sure that I took out more of them than you did, Naruto, Shisui bragged, as he and the younger blonde finally made it to the rendezvous point. They were both greeted with a roaring fire, courtesy of Izumi and Toneri, who had both taken the initiative and prepared a camp for the night while they waited for their comrades to return. Predictably, Naruto and Shisui had taken a bit longer to finish their portion of the mission, since they needed to escape the battle at the camp and make sure that they weren't being followed. Naruto crossed his arms and closed his eyes. I wasn't counting how many I defeated. Shisui's ever-present grin only widened even further. You're only saying that because you know I beat more than you did. Compared to most other members of the Uchiha clan, Shisui was undoubtedly an oddball. While most Uchiha were quiet, he was rather expressive, and he also had a great sense of humor, though Naruto would likely comment that great was a subjective term, considering how much Shisui tried to get under his skin, which made him very pleasant to be around. So basically, he was the complete opposite of Fugaku. You guys sure took a long time, Toneri greeted me with a smile. By my estimation, it took you 30 minutes to shake the enemy off of your trail. Naruto sat down next to Izumi, and Shisui plopped down at the other end of the fire. The flames of the fire flickered almost violently due to the force of the wind, which created many intriguing shadows in the forest. Without a doubt, one could get lost in observing their beauty for hours. Those guys were relentless, Shisui complained in response. Probably because they were so embarrassed at being outclassed. Naruto glared in his comrade's direction, or perhaps it is because you insisted on taunting them as they pursued us. Shisui raised his arms in a defensive fashion. What's the point of doing this job if you can't find a way to enjoy it every once in a while? Funny enough, nobody voiced any sort of disagreement, and they each sat silently, staring at the fire. At that moment, Izumi subtly glanced in Naruto's direction, making sure not to be seen by anyone else. He had grown quite a bit over the past 3 years, but he still stood at an average size for an 11-year-old. His hair remained mostly the same, but his face had become more angular, leading to him appearing quite handsome. Izumi herself had grown quite a bit as well, looking more and more like her mother every day. Her hair had increased in length, and was now tied into a ponytail that reached the center of her back. At this point, the only thing that prevented her from looking like a mini-clone of her mother was the long, pronounced tear troughs under her eyes. Hours passed, and it was eventually just Naruto and Izumi who remained awake, with Shisui being the first to succumb to his exhaustion, and Toneri falling not too far behind. Izumi would be lying if she said that she wasn't happy that she and Naruto had been granted this brief time alone with each other. After a month apart, she felt that it was very much needed. Can I ask you something, Naruto? Izumi spoke up in a subdued tone, being sure not to wake the others up. Naruto, from his relaxed position in front of the fire, looked toward her inquisitively, and nodded. For whatever reason, Izumi found herself short for words, as she contemplated the best way to ask her closest friend, something that she had been meaning to ask him for quite some time. What do you think it means to be a shinobi? She asked, recalling the question she had asked herself long ago, as a child. The randomness of the question caught Naruto a bit off guard, but nevertheless, he looked back toward the fire in contemplation. As he did, Izumi patiently waited, wondering what his answer would be. She often wondered if people thought about these kinds of things as well. What did it mean to be alive? What was a shinobi? What was a village? These were all things she had been wondering since childhood. A shinobi is someone who endures and has the will to never give up, no matter what adversity they are faced with, Naruto responded. Izumi smiled softly, finding his interpretation to be both beautiful and accurate. It honestly sounded like something that someone could find in a piece of poetry, which was ironic, since it came from the mouth of someone that was notorious for rarely speaking. That sounds like you, Naruto, she complimented with a smile. You embody all of those characteristics. Izumi heard a soft chuckle next to her, and saw Naruto looking as amused as she had ever seen him before, which was saying a lot. She was enraptured by the sound of his laugh and the radiance of his smile. It was a far cry from the look he usually gave off, with his emotions concealed and eyes hiding deep-seated pain. Right now, at this moment, he wasn't hiding anything at all. Actually, I was thinking of you when I gave my answer, he confessed, causing Izumi's eyes to widen in surprise. Nobody represents the ideal shinobi better than you. For perhaps the first time in her life, Izumi found herself blushing. As a prodigious talent, she has spent all of her life being praised by others, which essentially made her immune to being flustered by compliments. However, hearing something so genuinely touching from the person that she cared for the most in this world, well, it made her feel a way that she had never felt before. Thankfully, the shadows created by the fire hid enough to where Naruto didn't notice, or maybe he did catch a glimpse of her vulnerable moment and refused to comment. In all honesty, she would prefer to think that it was the former, but the later was equally, if not more likely. Suddenly, and without thinking, Izumi placed her right hand on top of Naruto's left. If someone could have asked her what overtook her at that moment, she honestly wouldn't have had an answer for them. It just felt right, if that made any sense. Naruto didn't outright react to the gesture, as he continued to stare at the fire. No words were said, which was good since they would have only interrupted the moment. At first, his lack of reaction made Izumi feel incredibly nervous. What was he thinking? Was he confused by the gesture? As if he could hear her thoughts, Naruto turned toward her and smiled, making no move to remove her hand from his own. At that moment, she knew that she had made the right choice. The Ansatsu Senjutsu Takusha Butai, more commonly referred to as Anbu, was a special assassination and tactical squad of capable, covert operatives dispatched by the Hokage himself. They were the elite of the elite, dealing in only high-risk missions consisting of A-rank or even S-rank difficulty level tasks. Recruitment into the Anbu was not at all based on rank or experience, but rather, entirely on the merit and skill of the prospect. However, a prospect's abilities weren't the only factors taken into consideration. Due to the darkness involved in Anbu's career, one's personality also determined their eligibility. They worked in the darkness to protect those that resided in the light, such was their duty. The Hokage, along with his trusted advisors, Danzo, Kaheru, and Homura, were currently locked in a discussion pertaining to the news list of possible Anbu recruits. The debate stemmed from the two final remaining names, each which had been proposed by Danzo himself, which was a rare occurrence indeed. To recommend that two children so young be inducted into the Anbu, such a proposal would be unprecedented, Kaheru voiced with skepticism. Danzo remained stoic, as always, even when having his judgment questioned. They are not ordinary children, he countered. I personally have overseen the development of the boy. Having him serve anywhere other than the Anbu would be a waste of his talents. He and the girl both would benefit the village most there. Kaheru's face grew pensive as she contemplated her old comrade's words, while Homura remained quiet, preferring to gauge the reactions of the others before making his own decision. The Hokage, however, seemed almost relaxed, as if he was unconcerned with what was going on. Naruto Uzumaki is the honorable son of our fourth Hokage. Homura finally spoke up after realizing nobody else intended to speak. Would being placed in such a dangerous position at so young an age truly be what his father would have wanted for him? If Danzo were less concerned with concealing his thoughts and emotions, he would have scoffed. In this room, where everyday decisions were made that would affect the future of the village for years, there was no room for such foolish sentimentality. In his eyes, Naruto wasn't the son of their village's greatest hero. He was, like all shinobi, an asset, and assets were used, not protected. And what of the girl? Kaheru chimed in. With tensions between the village and the Uchiha clan being as high as they are, would it truly be wise to place her in a position where she will be granted access to classified information? Her words were difficult to argue against. With every year that went by, the Uchiha clan's ties to the village became weaker and weaker. Their clansmen became more and more reclusive, staying within the confines of the Uchiha district, and the police force, headed by Fugaku, was losing the trust of the village's populace as a whole. Izumi Uchiha can be trusted, Hiruzen interjected, speaking for the first time in quite a while. That child is capable of seeing the bigger picture already. Her mind operates far beyond his ears. Danzo nodded in agreement, and the boy is arguably even sharper, he said, once more attesting to his student's prowess. I can assure you that in the history of our village, no shinobi has been born with more potential. He must be given the opportunity to gain more experience. Kaheru and Homura both found their eyes widening immediately after hearing his words. Danzo was not one for exaggeration or hyperbole. If he said something, he meant it. To listen to him so utterly confident in the potential of this young boy was astounding. In all honesty, for them, it was enough to erase any of their doubts. If Danzo vouched for him, then he was ready. Ultimately, the decision is yours, Hiruzen Homura continued, deciding that they put an end to the debate once and for all. Hiruzen remained silent, as he appeared to smoke his pipe contemplatively. In truth, his decision had been made before the whole argument had even begun. Naruto and Izumi would be inducted into the Anbu. They possessed the necessary prowess, and their skills would be best put to use serving their village within the shadows. I agree with Danzo's proposal, he concluded. Naruto Uzumaki and Izumi Uchiha will be recruited into the Anbu Black Ops. While the decision didn't leave anyone jumping for joy, Danzo was pleased with how things turned out. Without another word, he slowly rose to his feet before making the slow journey out of the office. As he exited, the rhythmic tapping of his cane could be heard moving down the hall. Danzo would never push forth a proposal unless he had his own agenda, Hiruzen, Kaheru warned, as she was too prepared to leave. You of all people should know that by now. With that, the last of the three advisors left the room, leaving Hiruzen alone to continue smoking his pipe in peace. Silence reigned for quite a while, as the Hokage appeared to use this opportunity to get some well-earned relaxation. His job had been more stressful than ever, as of late, which would mostly be attributed to the growing threats to the village, both inside and out. "What do you think, Kakashi?" he suddenly asked out of the blue. As soon as he spoke, a figure appeared before him in a kneeling position. He wore the standard Anbu attire, which included a porcelain mask that concealed his identity, though his spiky silver hair was still entirely visible. Now in the presence of his leader, he removed the mask, revealing his facial features, which, oddly enough, were still mostly hidden from view. His right eye was black, and for the most part, he would be described as having a relaxed, heavy-lidded expression. There was a vertical scar over his left eye, alluding to a past injury of some kind, and he kept it closed for the most part. This, combined with a mask he used to cover the lower half of his face, prevented the majority of his appearance from being seen. "They're both so young, Lord Hokage," Kakashi remarked, voicing his skepticism while also remaining as respectful as possible. Hiruzen chuckled. "As were you when you became a genin, N.A., he joked. "If I'm not mistaken, you were the youngest in the history of our village for all three of those instances. You of all people should understand that age should not factor into one's rank, only ability." "I suppose so," Kakashi relented, though it was clear that he was still iffy on the idea. Still, at the end of the day, it was not up to him. "Izumi Uchiha will be filling the vacant spot on your squad," Hiruzen continued. Kakashi's brows raised slightly. "And where will Naruto be assigned?" Hiruzen smiled, as he thought of his plans for Naruto. Yes, it was the perfect fit for him. "Well, you see." Naruto and Izumi both remained silent, as they descended the steps to the subterranean base, which served as the headquarters of the Konoha Anbu Black Ops. There was no guided tour of any kind, and they were merely informed of where they would need to go. First, they would retrieve their equipment from the armory before going to their individual assignments. "I sense a presence ahead. We must be reaching the bottom soon," Izumi observed. Naruto sensed it too, and they were quickly proven correct when the steps finally came to an end, and they found the armory, which was identifiable by a fluorescent sign. There was a lone Anbu manning the weapons storage lockers, and he was protected behind a set of steel bars, with only a single slot for him to pass on whatever was being requested. It could be inferred that operatives could fill out requests for any equipment they needed, should theirs need replacing, and it would be provided to them. Naruto and Izumi approached the armory, and without so much as a word of greeting, the man slid 2 trays through the opening. The first was given to Izumi, and the second was passed along to Naruto. Each tray contained a porcelain mask with a unique design painted on it, and the standard set of Konoha Anbu armor, as well as a tanto. "Here's your equipment," the Anbu drawled, his voice as monotone as one would expect. Izumi nodded in appreciation. "Thank you very much," she said before they both turned around and made their way toward the lockers' rooms. They walked down a dimly lit hallway and passed several doorways. Each room contained the lockers for a respective squad, and was where each member would change in and out of their uniforms before and after missions. It was also the only location in which operatives were allowed to use their real names when communicating with one another. Eventually, they reached a door with the kanji for role labeled above. Izumi suddenly came to an abrupt stop, which told Naruto that she had finally reached her assignment. "This is my squad's locker room," she explained before giving Naruto a small smile. "Wish me luck." Naruto nodded in acknowledgement before continuing on without a word. Behind him, he heard the door open, and Izumi offered a brief greeting before it closed behind her, trapping all sound inside. He smiled slightly to himself, as he continued to lug his equipment to his intended destination. Izumi was always so polite when meeting new people. Even without knowing of her talent, most instantly admired her due to how well she treated others. Much like the stairs leading to the hidden base, the hallways seemed to go on forever, and Naruto's eyes narrowed before shifting into his Sharingan. After doing so, he quickly realized that something was amiss, and made the slightest fluctuation in his chakra to break free of the subtlety that had been placed on him. When he did, he noticed a presence behind him. There was a lone Anbu that seemed to have been following him. He was wearing a dark-headed cloak over his armor, so only his mask and sandals were visible. He stood ominously in the shadows, not uttering a single word, seemingly preferring to stare at Naruto eerily. "Welcome to Anbu, Naruto Uzumaki. I hope that you are ready to experience pain the likes of which you could have never envisioned in your worst nightmares," the man said in a grave tone, though in reality, it came off more as someone pathetically attempting to change their voice to make it sound more intimidating. Naruto sighed. "Is it you, Shisui?" The Anbu froze in place, and no. "Who is this Shisui you speak of? I can sense your chakra, you know." Naruto continued. "Damn it." Some time later. "So, Lord Hokage placed me on a team with you," Naruto remarked, as he and Shisui stood next to each other at the edge of the Naka River. "I was unaware that you were in the Anbu." After putting on his new gear, much of Naruto's appearance was left to the imagination. Like all other Anbu, his attire consisted of a black, sleeveless, skin-tight turtleneck shirt, a grey flak jacket, metal arm guards with gloves, ninja sandals with barely visible spikes for traveling into mountainous regions, 3 pouches on his back waist, and a signature red spiral tattoo on his left shoulder. In addition, he also wore his new tanto strapped on his back. His face was also hidden by his new porcelain mask, with red painted on designs which depicted what appeared to be a fox. There was even a slight protrusion for the snout, a set of pointed ears, as well as 2 circular eye holes, through which his Sharingan could be seen. Yeah, normally I work highly classified missions, so I rarely talk about it, Shisui responded casually, dressed identically to Naruto, though he opted to wear the Uchiha-style short-sleeved, high-collared shirt under his grey flak jacket, rather than the standard sleeveless turtleneck. His mask depicted a raven, including a fairly long protrusion for the beak. Naruto nodded. Which codenames will we use to refer to one another when we are on duty? Shisui turned to face him, and Naruto was confident that behind his mask he was grinning. You will call me Crow, and I will call you Fox. Is that acceptable for you? Fox. Naruto was beginning to wonder if the Hokage was playing some kind of joke on him. Were he a lesser man he would have been greatly offended, having to essentially bear likeness to the beast that wreaked havoc on his village, killed his parents, and now painted an enormous target over his sister's head. I was young when my father's health began to decline, Shisui spoke up out of the blue, staring down at his reflection in the river. And one day, I snuck out into the woods in frustration, and was practically assaulted by a murder of crows, resulting in me losing my footing, and falling into a ravine. I very nearly died, and for a while, I was terrified of those crows, and was always afraid of training in the woods. Naruto glanced toward his friend. He already had a pretty good idea about what he was getting at, but he was going to let him finish before chiming in. It was a polite thing to do, after all. A few months later, I became sick of being afraid, and returned to the place where I had been attacked, Shisui continued before looking away from the water, and directly into Naruto's eyes. The crows surrounded me once more, however this time, I refused to move or be afraid. I embrace what had once caused me trauma in my past, and now, I bear the likeness of a crow on my mask, and have a summoning contract with the very crows that attacked me. Naruto responded after a moment of thought, I am not afraid of the Kyuubi, nor do I hate it. It is a force of destructive nature that was momentarily released from its prison. The result was to be expected. Shisui shook his head. It is not the Kyuubi that haunts you, but rather, the event that it represents, he explained. That night you lost so much, and while you are adept at hiding your pain from others, the weight that you carry on your shoulders is as clear as day to me. While he presented himself as rather laid back and carefree, Shisui was far from a fool. In fact, Naruto was entirely confident in the fact that his friend was every bit as intelligent as he was. Shisui's genius extended far beyond a talent for the shinobi arts, granting him the ability to perceive things most people couldn't notice, as well as tackle issues that most would sweep away under the rug. Shisui then closed the distance between them, and placed his hand on Naruto's shoulder. You're good at fooling yourself. That's why you can't grasp your true feelings. Never forget what you lost, but don't allow it to continue making you miserable, he advised. That's why I made the request to Lord Hokage that your mask and codename be what they are. Naruto nodded resolutely. I understand. I will have a lot to think about now. Thank you. Upon realizing that his little speech had actually worked, Shisui practically glowed, no doubt with a toothy grin concealed behind his mask. If there was one thing that Shisui loved above all else, it was helping people that were in need. In fact, the very first time they met one another was when Shisui decided to help him in his training. They've been training partners ever since. Have you spoken with Toneri since your promotion? Shisui asked, changing the subject. Naruto nodded. He always made sure to keep in close contact with his teammates and friends. Toneri, along with Shisui, was without a doubt Naruto's closest friend, outside of Izumi, of course. Though, admittedly, his relationship with her was a bit more difficult to define. He is happy for me, Naruto explained. Apparently, he received a similar offer to become one of Danzo-sensei's personal Anbu. Apparently, he still hasn't decided on whether or not he'll accept. Team 1, otherwise known as Team Danzo, had a strange tenure, to say the least. They were arguably the least active of all the Genin teams from their graduating class, as they focused more on training and battle simulations than actual missions. Hana got a bit left behind though when their opportunity to take the Chunin exams came around. Naruto and Toneri felt that they were ready, but Hana felt that she wasn't as prepared as her teammates, so she opted to sit out. In the end, it all worked out since Izumi was without a team for the exam, so she took Hana's place, and the three passed the exam with flying colors. After that, Team 1 stayed together for a while, until Hana started working as a veterinary medical nin, essentially retiring from the team. Naruto still kept in touch with her, and was pleased to hear that she was much happier in her new job, preferring helping animals over combat. However, needless to say, Danzo-sensei was not pleased. Shisui scoffed behind his mask. If I were him, I'd stay away from that creepy old fart and his private army, he chimed in, before quickly tensing up. I mean, no offense since he was your sensei and all. Naruto shook his head. It's okay. I don't have the highest opinion of him either, he clarified. While we fight for the same goal, I find myself questioning his methods and motivations. With a tilt of the head, Shisui responded. Care to go into detail? He asked. I believe that he truly wants what is best for the village, Naruto elaborated after pausing in thought. However, he is unable to trust others, and therefore, wrongfully believes that he is the only person that can protect Konoha and lead it to prosperity. I think that such a mindset is incredibly dangerous, especially when the person has the resources that Danzo-sensei possesses. Shisui nodded in agreement. People like that are willing to do anything to reach their goals, he said. When you think that you're advancing toward the greater good, anything you do feels justified, especially when you're a cynical narcissist like him. A new voice behind them chuckled. Cynical narcissist, eh? That's a good one. Before the intruder had even finished their sentence, Naruto and Shisui were standing meters away, atop the river's surface, tantos drawn, and ready to fight. However, their efforts were quickly proven to be pointless. Why? Because the Hokage himself was standing before them, conical hat and all. Lord Hokage, they both greeted each other respectfully before bowing. Secretly, however, they were racking their brains. They couldn't feel his chakra or presence at all. The Hokage smiled. Pardon my intrusion, but I couldn't help but find myself captivated by your conversation. Especially at the mention of your backstory about the crows, Shisui. I nearly shed a tear. Shisui's shoulders slumped in embarrassment while Naruto's tensed. Something didn't feel right, leaving him completely on edge. Where are you really, Lord Hokage? Naruto asked. The old man actually seemed more pleased than put off at being caught in my office, enjoying my pipe and a good book. Is it one of the Itachi novels? Shisui asked, perking up instantly. Now it was the Hokage's turn to appear embarrassed, in fear of being outed to his village, as a pervert. However, his secret seemed to be safe with Shisui, who pulled a copy of Itachi Paradise, revealing himself to also be a fan. After getting over the fact that two of the people he respected the most were fans of his godfather's erotic novels, Naruto focused his Sharingan on the Hokage, and noticed something incredible. He was intangible, and made entirely of chakra. It was as if the Hokage was standing before them, and yet, he wasn't. I see that you are impressed by my usage of the astral projection, Naruto, the Hokage commented with a knowing smile. With it, I can appear anywhere within the village, relatively undetected. Naruto was left criticizing himself, as the Hokage finally revealed the mystery behind his appearance. Of course, the figure standing before them was a projection. It was relatively obscure with incredible versatility, but it was also very limited. One could only project their image to a place that was familiar to them, and they were also required to be within a reasonable distance. Shisui crossed his arms, and nodded sagely. I understand completely, he stated, showing that he had knowledge of them, as well. It's a pervert's dream, allowing one to spy on women undetected. How true. Naruto didn't want to imagine a world where Jiraiya-sensei knew such a thing. No woman would be safe from his perverted gaze. In fact, the very idea of him speaking to someone like Lady Mikoto made Naruto feel very uncomfortable. The Hokage laughed uproariously at Shisui's observation. If only I had the time to use it in such a manner, he commented, with his cheeks gaining a bit of a red hue. Though come to think of it, I am free every Friday afternoon. Lord Hokage, Naruto interrupted before one of his idols could embarrass himself any further. Surely you have a purpose for speaking with us. The Hokage instantly shifted into the state which Naruto was most familiar with, that of a calm, wise leader. Shisui noticed this sharp change, as well as he just as quickly straightened his posture. It then became clear to them that the Hokage would only go out of his way to speak with them if it was something serious. Hiruzen closed his eyes, and placed his arms behind his back. As of this moment, especially after hearing your words, I consider you two to be among my most skilled and trusted subordinates, he confessed. Which is why, when presented with as daunting a task as the one I am about to give you, I only feel validated in my initial belief that you are indeed the most qualified for this mission. The world and even time itself seemed to freeze, as they waited on every word. That is why I must ask that you infiltrate Kamagakure no Sato, and deliver a message to our friend the Reikage. The day before a mission. Days like these were always the most simplistic, and by extension, the most enjoyable. It was less of a calm before the storm, and more of an opportunity to appreciate the things that he fought so fervently to protect. Sitting at the dinner table with his family, Izumi, Lady Mikoto, Mito, and Sasuke, he felt secure in what he was about to do in the coming days. So, Naruto, what does this mission of yours entail? Mikoto asked after everyone had explained how their day had gone. Naruto waited to swallow his food before responding. I'm not allowed to discuss it any further than we already have, Lady Mikoto. Mikoto hid her worry well, and simply nodded before returning to her meal. Fugaku, on the other hand, noticed it clearly, as day, and very nearly signed openly. His wife was, as worrisome, as they came, especially when it came to her children. The very thought made him frown, as he continued eating. It was almost, as if she expected them to be babies forever. Well, still, I'll need you to promise me that you'll stay out of trouble and keep safe. Understood. Mikoto demanded the authority of a parent. She had a bad feeling about this mission of his. Yes, ma'am. I will do my best. His answer seemed to satisfy her, as the ever so slight tension in her shoulders quickly dissipated. For Naruto, lying to Mikoto was incredibly tricky. In reality, the risk involved in this mission was about as high as it got, and all it would take was one mistake for him, and Shisui to perish or worse, be captured by the enemy. Fugaku placed his chopsticks on his plate, and gave his wife a sideward glance. The boy is an Anbu now, Mikoto. Have little faith in his abilities, and stop worrying yourself to death every time he leaves the village. It was admittedly a bit weird hearing Fugaku openly express confidence in Naruto, yet, at the same time, it wasn't strange at all. While always a bit put off by his wife's insistence on making Naruto a fully fledged member of their family, he never once doubted Naruto's strength. In fact, there were likely few out there who knew more about how talented Naruto was than he did. I'm sorry for worrying about my son, Mikoto responded calmly, though her tone was slightly edged, like a knife. Fugaku clenched his fist in an attempt to calm himself. For the last time, woman. That boy is not your. At the last moment, he stopped himself, but the damage was mostly done. Naruto continued eating his meal, as if nothing had happened, while Izumi merely stared at her plate silently. On the other hand, Mito and Sasuke looked incredibly uncomfortable, as if they'd rather be any place than they currently were. Go ahead and say it, Mikoto growled through clenched teeth. This had all been years in the making, really. Fugaku was sick of his wife's strange desire to take on Minato and Kushina's boy, as if he was her own. Mito was more understandable, since she was taken on, as an infant. Mikoto raised her in the same way she did Izumi and Sasuke. But Naruto. Fine, I'll say it, he said, removing his napkin from his lap and placing it on the table. Naruto is a guest in our home, and while his impact is felt by us all, it does not make him a part of our blood. He already possesses our eyes, is that not enough? Shall he take on our name, as well? Mikoto was left speechless, and the entire kitchen was left completely silent. At this point, Mito was openly sniffling, and doing her best to keep her tears from showing, and Sasuke was clenching his tiny fists underneath the table. Seeing this, Fugaku instantly felt regretful. He had allowed his stress to finally get to him, and said something he didn't really mean. Naruto stood from his seat, being the first to pierce through the painful silence. I have to begin preparations. Thank you for the meal, Lady Mikoto. Without another word, he exited the kitchen, walked down the hall, and entered his room. That seemed to wake everyone up. Sasuke loudly pushed his chair back, and ran into his room, slamming the door behind him with childish fury. Seeing Sasuke get so angry was the last straw for Mito, who began to openly bawl. Thankfully, Izumi was mindful enough to take the girl into her arms, and bring her to her room. And with that, only the man and the woman of the house remained. Are you happy now, Fugaku? Mikoto snapped with crossed arms. Predictably, her husband was conflicted in his response. Of course not, he countered. Now I'm a villain in my own home. Finally, at the breaking point, Mikoto glared in a show of rage. Then maybe you should take a long look at yourself, and wonder why that is. The last thing Fugaku saw of his wife for the entire evening was her back, as she stomped away to their room, closing the door roughly behind her. Any reasonable man would surely make the assumption that he'd be sleeping elsewhere for the evening, and Fugaku was about as reasonable as they came. Sighing in a mixture of annoyance and exhaustion, he got to work cleaning the dinner table, which was usually a task his wife undertook alone. It made him appreciate her more than usual, as he stared at the table before him. He hardly knew what to do with any of the leftovers, and it was quite daunting once he was reminded that he'd have to do this all on his own. Not a man to shy away from a challenge though, Fugaku got to work, starting with the most simple of tasks. How foolish I've been, he thought to himself, as he washed dishes for what felt like the first time in years. For the longest time, he had been keeping his stress and anger bottled up inside, to the point where an eruption like tonight was only bound to happen eventually. Bearing the weight of the entire clan at a time in which relations with the village were at their worst ever, needless to say, he rarely slept. Right, as he grabbed a rag to dry a now freshly cleaned plate, he froze, as he just now noticed a presence behind him. His mind raced, as he wondered who it could be. His enraged wife. His genius of a daughter present to explain how much he had just screwed up. Or worst case scenario, one of the little ones begging to know why he hated their older brother so much. After taking in a slow breath, he turned to face whatever it was he had coming to him. The climactic encounter never came to pass, however, as he looked upon a somewhat unexpected sight. His blonde charge was dutifully getting to work cleaning the table, placing leftovers into containers, and stacking the dishes that needed to be cleaned. I'll clear the table while you clean the dishes, Lord Fugaku, Naruto said without looking in his direction. At a loss for words, Fugaku quietly watched in awe, as Naruto did what he pretty much always did. Persevere through hardship, and come out the bigger man. He could have locked himself away in his room, and lamented about the fact that he still hadn't been accepted into the family, but he didn't. No, he came out to help the very man that continued to push him away. Upon seeing this, Fugaku had only one question. Why? he asked, sounding far more stupefied than perhaps he had ever been in his entire life. Naruto finally stopped cleaning and turned to face his legal guardian, his expression calm, far beyond his years. Fugaku would never get used to just how intelligent and mature this boy was. It left him reminded of what it had felt like watching Minato rise through the ranks during his early years. Because when I had nothing and nowhere to go, you took me into your home and gave me a place to live, Naruto explained, almost as if it were obvious. There will never be a day where I have finished paying you back for all that you've done for Mito and me. Helping you clean a kitchen table is the least that I can do. Without another word, Naruto continued on his way to the refrigerator and stacked the first of the leftover food away before returning to collect the rest. After finally getting over his shock, Fugaku got back to work cleaning up the remaining dishes, and in no time at all, the duo had completed the task in no time at all. Once they were finished, the two stood awkwardly in the middle of the kitchen. Now that they didn't have a chore occupying their attention, the underlying tension that had been permeating through the air was now on full blast. It was quite clear that Naruto didn't know whether he should stay or leave, and that Fugaku was racking his mind for something to say. In the end, it was Naruto who silently cleared his throat first, if that's all. It's not, Fugaku interrupted, almost wearily. Follow me, boy. It's about time we talked. As he often did, Fugaku turned without any further instruction, and walked toward the door, clearly intending for his charge to follow. While Naruto remained oblivious to what Fugaku's true intentions were, he felt no need to disobey him, so he was at his heels almost immediately, as they both stepped out of the house, and onto the porch. The air was chilly, and nipped at their skin, but they both paid it little mind, as Fugaku leaned forward onto the railing, and stared up at the starlit sky. While he waited patiently, Naruto also admired the sheer beauty of the cosmos, quickly recognizing several of the constellations he had used in the past, to navigate through the world past the village walls. You represent everything in which I was brought up to despise, Naruto, Fugaku suddenly confessed, and in a rare instance, called Naruto by his name. I don't understand, Naruto responded simply. Fugaku glared at nothing in particular, you're an Uzumaki, which essentially makes you a Senju and all, but name, he explained. And you also have the Sharingan, the only thing the Uchiha clan still possesses, that makes us worthy of any respect or prestige these days. There was a hint of resentment within his tone, but it was clear to Naruto that none of it was directed toward him. No, Fugaku-sama was expressing disdain for the Senju and the higher-ups of the village. This was years and years of pent-up anger being released all at once. The one thing that made us different from everyone else, and the Senju now have it, as well, he continued. They took control of the village, and boxed us away in the outskirts, as if we were rabid animals in need of monitoring. And now one of their descendants has awakened our eyes, as well. Everything was quickly becoming clear, as Naruto listened to the pure truth being laid out before him. He actually straightened his posture, as he listened to Fugaku list off all of the slights the Uchiha had faced, since the Senju had taken control of the village decades ago. In a way, he felt guilty, even though he had no hand in any of it. And then, Fugaku's glare weakened. Yet despite my continued efforts, I cannot bring myself to hate you, he finished. I took you into my home with the hopes that I could at least use you to my advantage. If the Senju would mock me from beyond the grave by granting their descendant the sacred of my clan, then I would at the very least make use of him. At this point, Naruto couldn't bring himself to look away from the man who was currently pouring his entire soul into his words. But despite my attempts to keep you at length, much like my wife, my son, and my daughter, you have become more to me than a mere guest, he finished, causing Naruto's eyes to widen. I brought the enemy into my home, and now I cannot help but look upon him with pride in a way that a father looks upon his own son. Finally, Fugaku turned to face him. I don't know where this next mission of yours will take you, however I expect you to return home in one piece, he commented before walking past Naruto, and back to the front door. Your mother would be devastated if something were to happen to you. Quick to compose himself, Naruto nodded resolutely without turning around. I will return, Lord Fugaku. The Uchiha patriarch hummed in acknowledgement before sliding the front door closed behind him, as he likely went to get some much-needed sleep. It was likely that he'd find himself with a full night's rest for the first time in quite some time, after finally getting so much off of his chest. Naruto, on the other hand, felt as if a tsunami of powerful emotions had just swept him away, leaving him crumpled up and exhausted. Today had been trying, indeed, topped off by an evening of ruction. At this rate, he'd hardly be able to get himself out of bed in the morning. But still, he'd be lying if he said there wasn't a pleasant warmth exuding from his chest. Acceptance felt good. Thanks for watching my video, leave a like if you enjoyed my video, and also do consider subscribing to my channel for more awesome content. See you next time, till then sayonara.